Doing well, my bud. Doing well.
When was the last time we did this?
Been some time. It's been quite some time.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't know who we are, you forgot our faces. My name is Ruben Calvillo. That is a handsome man, Harley Dugan. This is Believe in Texans, and we want to give a shout out to Believe for allowing us to be on this platform here. Guys, this episode was brought to you by Bet Online. So jump into the action right now. Use our promo code BLEAV for a first time bonus deposit. There is a lot of money to be made right now off of sports. College basketball is underway. NHL is underway. NBA starts back tomorrow, I believe, after the All-Star break. Speaking of the All-Star break, man, that was absolutely a horrible performance. And it's not like how it used to be. It's not like how it used to be in the Pro Bowl either. Honestly, the only
Yeah.
All-Star game that I still watch is from baseball, is MLB. It's the home run derby. It's the AL versus the
hmm
NL. And it's sad that we saw what we saw from the NBA All-Stars. Yes, we will have John McClain on. He is going to join us at about 7:55. We are going to talk about this season, then preview what's to come. Because what's to come, Harley, is, dare I say, greatness in this Texans team.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun to get into. The Houston Texans definitely. We have a future, obviously, and everything that happened in the last year. You talked about the NBA All Star Game, and that was snooze
Mm.
fest. 3-point contest is the only thing that's half decent. Um, the Steph versus Sabrina thing, I actually enjoyed it. I like the
You
competition.
wanted to win so
Um, you
bad.
know, yeah, I wanted her to win.
Yeah,
I was like, yeah, let's. And at one point, it was like, okay, Steph, come on, Steph Curry,
keep
like
going.
kick it into gear now. So yeah, it is interesting to see. That was fun, and dunk contest was boring, so boring. The judging sucks, and the NBA All Star Game is absolutely garbage. Fantastic comment there from Joe. Did you hear about Tillman Fertitta wants to bring hockey to the city? I'm excited about it. Come on, bring hockey to Houston. I'm happy to hear that. I am. The Arrows, sure, why not? That's a lot of fun, man. I'm happy to hear that.
I have an old school arrows hat, but it's in the shape of a bear. And the bear
Okay.
itself is wearing an arrows cap, man. Shout out to the arrows. Hayes Ruben hit him the gym. I'm not gonna say the last part, but yeah, trying to go a little bit, consistently 2 to 3 days a week. Shout out to my boy Jacob for getting me there. Um, Nathaniel says way more than enough for Barkley and Evans. Absolutely, we will have enough for those two. Are we gonna do it though? That is the question. Stroud dropped 31 points in the celebrity game. I love to see that. However, Micah Parsons did get him a couple of times. So, that was the only fun thing, right? I would have not tuned in this All-Star weekend if CJ Stroud wasn't playing on, I believe, Friday, no, or Saturday.
Yeah, I would have tuned. I tuned into the Celebrity All Star Game. A lot of fun. I enjoyed that more than anything the NBA had. That was enjoyable. With or without CJ Stroud, I like the Celebrity Game. I do. CJ was fun. He was absolutely atrocious behind the 3-point line. Didn't make a single 3-point shot, but 32 points, I want to say, or 30
31,
points, something like
31.
that. Um, 31. Michael Parsons is an absolute bully. That guy is a bully. He should definitely be charged for unnecessary roughness as many times as possible in the NFL due to his bullying in the Celebrity All Star Game. I can't wait to see CJ Stroud take the actual W this season when they play the Dallas Cowboys. So, yeah, that's all I got to say about that.
That's gonna be absolutely fun, man. I was looking at our
Yeah.
schedule earlier today, and dude, it is gonna be so freaking hard, man. You're gonna go almost against 7 to 8 playoff teams next season. So excited for the future. Um, Free agency is approaching us, Harley. And
Yeah.
it's getting hard every day not to look at the possibilities of who this Houston Texans team could have. We'll get to free agency when Mr. John McClain joins us, because the Houston Texans in the past 48 hours have been rumored around 2 stars, right? One of them being Mike Evans, the other one being Saquon Barkley. I can see the Houston Texans going many different ways. We also have the draft in a couple of months, Harley. The combine is, I think, next week. And we have to
Yep.
keep our eyes on that as well. Texans have the 23rd overall selection, and we could go wide receiver, corner, defensive tackle. It's getting interesting, man. And it's now year 2. It's no longer year 1. It is the second year of CJ Stroud and D'Amico Ryans.
Yeah, these are exciting times for Houston Texans fans. One of the most exciting times, to be honest. It's always fun to have boatload of money, free agency, all the possibilities, all the news and rumors. Scout Combine, NFL Combine next week. Can't wait. Get to see who moves up in the draft, who moves down in the draft. You get to see a better, clear-cut picture of, who do you think is going to be in for the Houston Texans at 23. Maybe there's somebody that's there right now that probably doesn't, be there at 23. So who knows? And it's that fun part of the offseason when you got like that comment right there. When you got this player followed this player and this player followed all the Houston Texans. Like, that's always the funniest part of the offseason for me. I don't know what that does for me. I don't know what Saquon following CJ
It's flirting,
Stroud,
bro. You know what these guys are doing.
It's so weird to me. I'm like, okay, what does this do for me? Like, he's not. I don't see anything else happening besides him following a few guys. I will say though, who the hell is following Brevin Jordan?
Okay, all right. Well, let's get into it, right? So why, this was brought out to our boy James Roy. Shout out to James Roy. He said, hey, this might not mean anything, but Saquon Barkley follows CJ Stroud, Nico Collins, and JJ Watt. That's it. That goes viral in H-Town. And what seems like 30 to 40 minutes later, you now see Saquon Barkley following Tank Dell and Brevin Jordan. And honestly, like Harley just said, why the hell are you following our backup tight end? He knows what he is doing. This is flirting. This is these stars trying to give us an indication on where they want to go. I mean, we saw it with Patrick Queen and Derek Stingley going back and forth a couple of months ago. I absolutely love it. And what I love, bro, is that it's stars, dude. It's dudes who could produce on the football field. Like, remember when, when everything was looking so good, when you had number 4 and you had DeAndre Hopkins, right? When Russell Westbrook got traded to the Houston Rockets, someone commented under that, and that was Jalen Ramsey. And he said, wow, I guess all the stars are meeting up in Houston, right? That got us so excited here. And, it kind of took me back to that part where people are wanting to come and play for this Houston Texans team.
Yeah, it's the funniest part of the offseason. It happens every year now. Especially now with social media taking control.
Not with us, though.
It's just hilarious to me that we are circling news and rumors around Saquon Barkley because he followed these X amount of players for the Houston Texans. It's whatever to me. It is. Give me some more substantial news and rumors, and I know it's a little dead right now in terms of that, but you're not wrong with the flirting. Could it have been his agent that followed these guys, to grab some more people? Who knows? But it's just ridiculous to me.
And ladies and gentlemen, he has arrived. The General, John McClain. Harley, take it away for me, man.
How you doing, John?
I'm doing great, guys. How are you?
Fantastic.
Oh, we're doing fantastic. We met you at training camp. I don't know if you remember us. It was a brief little meetup just this past training camp. you were doing your catwalk right down the sideline.
I believe I
yeah,
remember that you guys were sitting down and you came up and introduced yourselves.
Yes, sir.
Yes.
I remember.
So
You guys are memorable.
good. Hey, I appreciate
They say
that.
we
I'll
look
take
the
it. I'll
same.
take memorable.
Thanks for having me on.
For some reason. Yes, thank you. So appreciate you joining us on the newest episode of the Believe in Texans podcast. We've been wanting to have you for quite some time, and we'll say that. We've been listening to you forever. I know, we don't try to make our guests feel old, but
I am old.
We've been, it is what it is, right? So we've been listening to you forever, as well as pretty much everyone else, obviously. Houston Sports Radio is in the background of the car in my dad's mornings during the weekdays as I'm going to school. And whether it was, 610, 790, or for anybody that remembers 1560 the game, hey, there we go. One of them three was always on.
Well, I did KTRH, the sports voice of the Southwest, for, let's see, 15 years. And then I jumped over to KILT when the Texans had their rights out to see who was going to get them. And I've told the story. I asked Bob McNair, I said, I've got a chance to go to KILT from KTRH, which had been the home of the Oilers. And I always like to be on the flagship's home station. And Bob told me, he said, well, I can't tell you who we're going with because this was like a year before. And I said, well, let me ask you this. If you had a chance to go from KTRH to KILT-AM, that was not Sports Radio 610 then, 24 years ago. And I said, what would you do? And he said, well, let me check with Jamie. Jamie Roots was not the president at that point. He was head of marketing, and he was doing all the negotiations with local stations to see who would have the rights. And Bob called me back a few days later, and he said, that question you asked me about what I would do? And I said, yes. And he said, I believe if it were me, I'm just saying if it were me, I would go to KILT-AM. I said, thank you. So I called Moose Rosenfeld, who was the son of the founder and the godfather of radio in Houston, really, Dickie Rosenfeld. And I told him, I said, if you still want to hire me, I'm available. And he did. And that's 24 years ago. And I got laid off 2 weeks ago, 39 years in a row on radio here. And it's weird. People think, well, he got laid off on 610, so he's not doing radio anymore. I do weekly shows in 7 cities, including Houston. I'm on Texans radio Thursday night at 6. I'm also doing hits on KRIV with Nate Griffin on Monday and Friday mornings. I do a video every Monday with Mattress Mac in which we talk about Houston sports. And then I still do shows in Austin, Waco, San Antonio, Las Vegas, Nashville, 2 there, and Knoxville. And there's a chance I'm going to be back on the radio in Houston sometime, probably before the draft.
Ooh, love that.
Hey, that's fantastic. Shout out to Chris. He did tell me to make sure to give him a shout out for the Texans Empire because he was fantastic to hear that John McClain was going to be on with us. So that's why I had that alarm noise to remind me to give that shout out to Chris Cotto. So shout out to him. I was like,
I thought something was going off in the oven.
No. It was a good little reminder to get him a little shout out on the Believe in Texans
tell him
podcast.
I said thank you.
Yeah, hey, no problem. He's here in the comment section, so he definitely probably heard it. We definitely want to get into a lot of Texans content here. We got a lot of, free agency talk and all that great jazz. I got a lot of stuff lined up for you. But I do want to start with Andre Johnson. He is now a Hall of Famer. Yes, Texans fans, it's not a dream. We don't have to pinch ourselves. Andre Johnson is a Hall of Famer. You've known him very well. You've known him for his entire career. And hey, what can you tell us behind the scenes about Andre Johnson and that experience?
Well, I presented him as I do all Houston players. And last year I presented Chuck Alley, the great Cowboy linebacker, because he had never been a finalist in the 50 years since his retirement. And as a young Cowboy fan growing up in Waco, I watched every game from the first one in 1960 until I came to the Chronicle in 76. And I like to tell people I had an exorcism to get that cowboy system out of my blood. And so became a fan of our teams. I already was the Astros. I go back to the first pitch of the first game in 62. And so but all the others have been Oilers. And Andre, this was his third year of eligibility. In the first 2 years, he and Reggie Wayne and Torrey Holt canceled each other out. Everybody on our committee, 48 of us, all agreed that all three of them deserved to go in the Hall of Fame. We didn't know how to break the log jam, and there was no set plan about breaking the log jam. We just made our presentations, and the way it is, whoever's presenting a player, I had five minutes in front of the committee, and and so I kind of changed my presentation because I don't want to hit them up with the same numbers and the same quotes. I don't want them yawning and let it go in one ear and out the other. So one of the things I did was I wanted a couple of coaches who were red hot, who were in the news a lot, and maybe that would get people's attention. And I went to Kyle Shanahan and Mike McDaniel. They both coached Andre when they were here. And at the time when we made the presentation, you know, the Dolphins were a legitimate contender. And of course, the 49ers were as well. So McDaniel had gotten a lot of attention the last 2 years, and Kyle always does. And both of them were tremendous. I incorporated their quotes along with some from Gary Kubiak. And one thing I did not do this year, I didn't point out anymore that Reggie Wayne played with Peyton Manning and Marvin Harrison, and Torrey Holt played with Kurt Warner and Isaac Bruce. Both of those players played with multiple Hall of Famers on both sides of the ball, including their coaches. And in Reggie Wayne's case, Bill Polian had drafted him. So Polian and Dungy were arguing for Reggie Wayne, and I was arguing for Andre. And so after you finish your presentation, everybody can talk about it. And a lot of people talked about Andre, and then it got into a discussion about the three receivers. And then at the end of that, when they say, okay, does anybody else have anything to add about Andre Johnson? They give you, the presenter, a chance to do one more thing. And so I gave a stat that I had saved that were Andre Johnson and Jerry Rice. And that was it, of Hall of Fame receivers. And then at the end of the day, you get another chance. I had another stat that Andre was number one and led Jerry Rice, because I wanted people thinking Andre Johnson and Jerry Rice. I didn't say anything about all the quarterbacks he played with. Didn't say anything about never had a wide receiver opposite him catch even 900 yards till DeAndre Hopkins came around his 10th year. But the others talked about that. And they talked about going back to David Carr and ending with Matt Schaub and all the quarterbacks in between. And I had done that the first 2 years, and I kind of knew they all know it. Doesn't need to be repeated. But others did talk about it. And then they had a reduction from 15 to 10, in which each of us turn in 10. And then they tell us who has been eliminated. Andre made the cut to 10 with Torrey Holt. Reggie Wayne didn't. I was shocked because last year all of them did. And the first year Andre was eligible, he's the only one that made it to 10, but he didn't make it to 5. So Andre's at 10, and then they let us say something else, and I gave them a quote I'd saved from Kyle Shanahan. And it was a great quote, and about if he could start a franchise, who he would like to have. And so then we vote from 10 to 5, and then when they tell us who the 5 are, that's almost guaranteed, because then you vote yes or no. And I've never voted no on anybody who made the final 5, because that's like torture. So once he got to 5, and they did it in alphabetical order, and I had my fingers crossed, my toes crossed, would have crossed my legs if I could have. And when they announced Andre, we were doing it on a Zoom. I hit the video button, and I kind of like did this. And then I went back, hit the video button, came back like this. I wanted to act like I'd been in the end zone before. And so I knew he was in the Hall of Fame. Then we had to keep it a secret. And I wrote a column about the big reveal, as the Hall calls it. And I wrote, and I'd been laid off at 610. I would have written it for 610's website, but the Texans wanted it, and it had a much bigger audience than I ever got at the Chronicle or 610 because they have 1.9 million Twitter followers, 2 million Facebook. And it's the longest story I ever wrote. It was all behind the scenes. I was the only media person there chronicling this because I'm on the committee, and how he was shocked when he opened the door at his house and cried like a baby. And that's probably, you could Google it or you could look for it on the Texans website or on my Twitter line. But it was very emotional being there with Andre when the door was open. He was in shock. Chris Carter standing there in his gold jacket talking to Andre. Andre doesn't remember anything he said. He was so numb, and his mom screaming and hugging him. And Kennard McGuire's agent set up a great ruse to be there and make them think it was Kennard's attorney coming over to the house. And when the knock came, they said, well, and Andre's mother was going to get it. And Kennard said, Andre, you better get that. So he goes up there, takes the door handle, and he looks out through the peephole, and he sees a gold coat. And he's thinking, like, well, it's kind of hot to be wearing a coat. And he opens the door, and there's Chris Carter and all the boom mics and the cameras and a couple Hall of Fame people, and he just cried. Only time I ever saw Andre emotional was when he kicked Cortland Finnegan's ass.
Man, Andre was and still is my favorite player. You know, it got emotional when I found out that, you know, he got into the Hall of Fame and immediately started watching his highlights, man. That's who I wanted to be when I was playing football with Harley. I wanted to be number 80, Andre Johnson. And, you know, I wanted to keep it right there. Like, for those who don't know, like, how impactful is it having him there in year one with D'Amico Ryans, with CJ Stroud, Tank Dell? Like, you got to think this is the OG. This is the guy who we all need to pay attention to, and just how impactful was Andre in this year one with the Texans.
Well, I was glad that Andre got in. I didn't want JJ because JJ will be a first ballot. I won't even have to say much about him, but I didn't want Andre to wait and JJ get in first. So I was so happy for him because I know being the first meant a lot to him because he's the first superstar the franchise has had. And it meant so much to him. It meant a lot to the Texans. You know, it meant a lot to the McNair family. And he went to Janice McNair's house after the big reveal on his way to Vegas. And she told him, if you need a ride to Canton, let me know. And Andre said he appreciated it. And so it meant so much to fans. And that's why I was honored to present him, and because he was so deserving, he's so gracious. At a time going back, probably T.O., Chad Johnson, Ocho Cinco, those guys would pour gasoline on themselves and light a match to get attention. And Andre, even though he's from the U, which has pumped out players like Michael Irvin, who's the same way as the other guys, he never looked for attention. You know, he never bragged. He was just, as I told the guys people on the committee, he's the personification of what we believe a Hall of Fame player should be. And I told him, I said, I watched every practice, every game, saw him behind the scenes in the locker room, and he was the embodiment of a Hall of Famer based on what everybody in this room believes a Hall of Famer should be. And so I'm still excited about it. Can't wait till Canton. And it's going to be being the first. The McNairs, every player has a party thrown in his honor in a big tent on the grounds of the Hall of Fame. And the McNair is going to have to get an extra big tent because of all the Texans fans who are going to want to be there for his induction.
How can the average Joe Schmo like me and Ruben get to the Hall of Fame to watch Andre Johnson's
Pro
speech?
Football Hall of Fame's website, and it has all the information about tickets on induction weekend, and you go and you get your tickets and you get there and you watch make sure you take your binoculars because so many Hall of Famers come back and they're on the stage, and then Andre will be making his speech. We asked him last week when he met with the media here for the first time, who would present him. And he said he had three people in mind, didn't want to tell who it was. And I'm guessing one of them is his agent and his close friend, Kennard McGuire. And I would guess Gary Kubiak would be one because
Mm.
when I'm on the Houston Sports Hall of Fame selection committee, and when we put Andre in, he asked Gary to introduce him. Gary did a great job. And as far as who the third one would be, I have no idea. But it's going to be fun. It's going to be emotional for a lot of people, and the McNairs are going to throw a hell of a bash. And I can't wait. I think the actual induction is August the 3rd.
Mm.
And then they have festivities leading up to that. So it's going to be a big crowd. So I would recommend anybody wanting to go check out those tickets right now.
Do you have a favorite Andre Johnson moment besides beating up Cortland Finnegan?
Yeah, one time when Andre, well, let me backtrack. When the Oilers were here and forever in the NFL, media could talk, watch all the practice. We could talk to any assistant coach. And then they decided we're the enemy. We're the necessary evil. So you can, most of them only let you watch at bare minimum of practice based on the rules, which is stretching. And they only make assistant coaches available a couple of times a year. And one time I asked Bill Parcells, I was president of the Pro Football Writers of America, and he wouldn't let anybody talk. And I said, Bill, I told him, I said, uh, when you were an assistant coach, you talked to media, right? Yeah, I did. And I said, when you were a head coach of the Giants, media watched practice, talked to assistant coaches. They told me they could talk to Belichick anytime. Yep. And I said, well, now you don't let anybody talk. You're the only voice of the Cowboys. He goes, yeah, what's your point? I said, you haven't won a Super Bowl since you adopted this policy. He said, are you trying to tell? I said, nope, I'm not trying to tell you anything. I'm just pointing out something you ought to think about. So since the Texans have been here, Gary Kubiak let us watch practice, talk to assistant coaches, and then the uh, current regime, going back to Bill O'Brien, they said no. With O'Brien and Nick Caserio coming from New England the Patriot way, it was to keep the media at arm's length. So we can be in the locker room for 40 minutes. And a lot of times guys aren't in there. PR staff does a great job to get them. But Andre every day would come to his locker after he showered. He would sit in front of his locker and the media would be all behind him.
Mm.
And he would sit there and he had his towel on and he learned how to put his underwear on under his towel. And he would stand up with his back to us and he would put his clothes on, his socks, his pants, his shoes. He would brush his hair. Then he would turn around and answer questions. And I asked him one time, I said, what do you do at home when you have to do all this by yourself? He said, what do you mean? I said, every day we're right there watching you get dressed. Don't you miss us at home? He said, you know what? I never thought about that. He said, when I come out, it's like nobody's here till I turn around. And when I turn around, all of you are there. I said, I've seen your back so many times I could detail every bit of it. And I thought that was very interesting. And the stories where he cried at finding out in the house. We all went inside after the initial big reveal, and he had to gather himself there. And at one point, he went over on his sofa. Well, he has a huge home, and all the Hall of Fame people, NFL Films, me, we were all kind of in his entryway, which was monstrous, leading over to his monstrous den and kitchen. And he had to walk away, and he sat on the sofa by himself, and we're all just looking at him, and he was crying. And then finally he sniffed a little bit, got his composure, and I was shooting pictures of this like crazy. They're in the middle of my story that I wrote for the Texans, and then he came back over and he was okay, and then he broke up again. People ask him, and I've had a lot, what were his biggest catches? And I remember one against Arizona when he caught a ball over the middle at the 5 and he had to bounce off at least three, maybe four people to score. One against Washington, in Washington, back of the end zone, in which he was covered, and he made a leaping catch just inside the back line, and the Texans won in overtime. And I remember Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan coming over from Washington's locker room to congratulate Gary Kubiak and Andre on that victory. And then he made one against the Titans in Tennessee, in which he was streaking down the right sideline. And just across the goal line, he reached out with one hand and caught the ball as he was losing his balance. And those to me are three that stand out. There was another one on the left sideline in which he went up and came down on his head. So there were many catches. And I go back to the draft. Charlie Casserly is my favorite general manager because he was old school. He believed in beat writers, newspapers, the power of newspapers. Newspapers don't have that influence anymore because every team has its own website, and you want a certain kind of coverage, you're going to get it from the website, which is mostly positive. And but Charlie would call me before the draft and say, "Who you got in your mock for us?" And I knew David Carr was going to get drafted in October, so I had him in all of them. But the second year, I was at the draft in New York, and I said, "Well, I'm kind of going with Andre Johnson." He said, "Put him down." And I said, "Well, what if Detroit takes Johnson?" He said, "They're not. They have to take Charles Rogers. They need a receiver. They have to take Charles Rogers from Michigan State." I said, "What if they don't? What if they take Andre or another player?" He said, "It's not going to happen. I can tell you, they're going to take Rogers." And I said, "Would you take Rogers?" He said, "No way." And he had too much baggage, and that's exactly what happened. They took Rogers. He was a huge washout because of his baggage. He never could get it together to embrace his talent. And so I told Gil Brandt, the longtime Cowboy head of scouting, who was worked for the NFL for years after Jerry Jones fired him in '89, and Gil was the one who would determine what players came to New York when they do the draft up there. And I told him, I said he wanted guys he knew were going to be drafted in the top 10. And I told him, "You don't have Andre Johnson on this list." And Gil said, he's not going to be drafted in top 10. I said, "Gil, yes, he is. He's coming to Houston." He said, my sources tell me no." And I knew Gil okay then. When he died last year, I knew Gil really well. Spent a lot of time to him, but I learned right after that, you never tell Gil Brandt, "I told you so," because I told him after. I said, "Gil, see, I told you." And he didn't take that very well, so I never did it again. But Andre should have been in New York with his mama, living it up because the NFL treated him like royalty when they were in Manhattan before they started moving them around. And to me, it's never been the same being in all these other cities. They've done a great job. But being in New York, downtown Manhattan, Radio City Music Hall, Madison Square Garden, the Javits Center, you couldn't beat that. It's like that first day of the draft there when Andre was drafted is like the pulse of the universe.
Yeah, I could see the New York vibe. I do like what they've been doing traveling because obviously, for bias purposes, I wanted to come to Houston. I want to be there. I like to see it
Well, they
happen.
bid,
So,
Houston bids on it, and I think
yes,
eventually that considering we've done such a great job with Super Bowls, Final Fours, college football playoff,
yeah,
now we're going to get a World Cup match, that we're going to get one. But how they decide, like it's like they're taking care of a lot of the old teams, and they probably should have it in Vegas every year because everybody loves going to Vegas. Super Bowl was a huge success this year, but it may have been the smallest crowd they've ever had. Used to, they'd want a stadium with at least a capacity of 70, but now they don't do that anymore. And so I think we're going to get it eventually. Two people that were great for campaigning for Houston, Bob McNair and Jamie Rhodes, they're dead. So they're not the ones campaigning because they had so many sources and they knew so many people they could rub elbows with. When we got our last Super Bowl, I was in Boston at a league meeting, and after it was over, Jerry Jones and Jeff Lurie from the Eagles, the owners, I interviewed them, and maybe Bob Kraft. And all of them said in one way or another, "We didn't vote this because it's Houston. We voted this for Bob McNair."
I will say, John, this was fantastic getting into some of the Andre Johnson stuff. We'll delve into one of the tweets I think that could start segueing us into the rest of the Houston Texans. The tweet I'm referencing is from Matt Miller. I don't know if you saw it. It kind of went a little viral yesterday. Matt Miller's tweet was pre-combine draft take. The Patriots should not draft a quarterback at number 3 overall. The roster isn't ready for a rookie quarterback and would just set his development back. This isn't Houston with a Hall of Fame left tackle and solid supporting cast. This is closer to Carolina, and we saw how that worked out. Obviously, the whole Texan social media, local radio took it and grabbed it as revisionist history. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this because I quite frankly agree.
Well, I got great respect for Matt Miller. He does a great job.
Yes.
But they didn't have a good roster. They didn't. Now they had it, and I wouldn't say Laramie Tunsil's a Hall of Fame left tackle. He might be someday. To me, to be in Hall of Fame, you got a run block and you got a pass block, like Trent Williams. He's great at both. And if you look at the people that they signed who produced this year, they didn't. I disagree with that totally.
Yeah.
If everybody picked them to be one of the 2-3 worst teams in the NFL with that roster, and nobody had a clue Stroud was going to be as good as he was, and a lot of that was coaching and how he took to the coaching. And you can't overemphasize the importance of having Bobby Slowick and Gerard Johnson back. And I think Bobby, as I've told everybody, and I wrote for 610, he's not ready to be a head coach. Gerard Johnson not ready to be a quarterback coach. They both were in their positions for the first time. Bobby's not going to be a head coach after 1 year and call plays. I said 2 years, he's out of here. Gerard will be the offensive coordinator in 2025. And so, no, I don't think that roster, they did a lot with Stroud, making great plays. The running game was not as bad as it had been, but still pretty bad. That's the thing they need to improve the most is the running game to take some pressure off Stroud. But and I think as far as New England not taking a quarterback, I'm guessing Matt would have told the Colts don't draft Peyton Manning. There have been a lot of Troy Aikman. You know, they were awful. Won one game his first year. He didn't even win it. Steve God, my mind's gone blank. Walsh, who's been a supplemental pick, who played for Jimmy Johnson in Miami. He got that win Troy's rookie year. So to me, you get that quarterback if you think he's worth it on the ground floor. And it's like you've had a bunch of puppies at the same time, and you watch them all grow. And they're going to stumble and they're going to fall on their face, and some are going to develop faster than others. And even though you may get mad at them, they're still yours. And I think if the Patriots have a chance to take a quarterback they like, they better grab it.
Staying with Bobby Slowick and Gerard Johnson, I think those were just two huge moves by the Houston Texans to bring them back. I'm not sure if you could tell us, but how real was the possibility of Bobby Slowick and Gerard Johnson leaving? And, you know, how big is this for the Houston Texans and C.J. Stroud's development going forward for the next, 2 years?
It's great to get them back. I didn't think either one would get the job. I said it on 610 that they're not ready. And I think the team's determined that. And especially Bobby, who is 36 and he looks like he's 26. And he's a good talker, and he's going to be a head coach. You know, he comes from a defensive background with a dad who's a coordinator for 4 teams. And he's got a brother who's coaching Miami's linebackers. And Bobby, I think, after this coming season, even though the schedule's brutal, so much more difficult than this year. And their record might not be better. They might be 9-8 instead of 10-7 because it is tough starting with the quarterbacks. I think he'll be gone because people will pay more attention to him and know, like D'Amico. D'Amico went back for his second year of seasoning as a play caller on defense. Kevin O'Connell did interviews, went back. Ben Johnson went back after he interviewed here. Now he's gone back again. And I've seen red-hot assistant coaches wait just too long. If the Lions lose Goff and all of a sudden they're 8-9, they don't make the playoffs, the bloom's going to be off that rose. Ben Johnson should have taken a job while he was hot. But I think that having Slowick back, but Gerard spends more time with him than any coach on the staff, and also a guy who spends so much time with him behind the scenes is Case Keenum. Case like another quarterback coach. He he kind of took Stroud under his wing behind the scenes. He can ask Case about situations, and Case has faced them all. And Gerard is not. Gerard's not an NFL player, and but Case is. If Case wants to be a coach, he'll be a coach. He might be a head coach. I would think a lot of teams would hire him in a heartbeat, starting with U of H and the Texans would both be after him. But I understand he's a real estate mogul. He might decide to do that, but Case could get a job in a heartbeat. And I'm so glad he's back because he played a big role behind the scenes in Stroud's development.
It's very interesting to hear Case Keenum. I know a lot of fans were penciling him in as immediately as a quarterback's coach replacement. So who knows there? But
he doesn't even know. I've talked to him about it,
yeah,
and he doesn't know at this point. He's having a blast doing what he's doing. He understood his role when he came here and signed here. They didn't know who the quarterback would be. They just know they wanted a quarterback, and they liked the top two, and they figured they were going to get one of them, and so Case bought in.
He was a key guy that they had brought in. The Houston Texans have a good amount of spending cash to go to this offseason. We'll delve into some free agency talk right now. You mentioned the run game. That's obviously been all over Texan social media, whether anybody, whoever they want, and there's plentiful of running backs out there. Who is the right pick? Who is the right fit? Who do you think the Houston Texans could get at the running back position at free agency? If you think they go that way.
I love all these fan sites and the national media. Sick that I had a national guy today. Will they sign Henry or Barkley? And he threw one in. I said none of the above. Really, the Texans are not? No, that's not what they're going to do. Number one, they're not going to go out and make a big splash and get Justin Matabike or Chris Jones or Mike Evans, even if those guys are available. They don't want guys who are 30. They know they're not going to the Super Bowl next season. Their season to be a Super Bowl contender would be 2025. They'll never say that, of course. And so they're Nick Casario's MO and D'Amico's get the same MO. They like to pick and choose at different positions players that D'Amico thinks fit the system. D'Amico really wanted Rankins, and I thought nothing of it when they signed Sheldon Rankins. Then I find out D'Amico thought he was ideal for what he wanted at that position, and he has each of his positions has something in his system that he's looking for. And Casario and him work well together, and Nick will make every effort to get the kind of player he wants. And so they're going to lose a lot of guys. And I don't think Jonathan Gennard will be back. I think somebody will overpay him. And Jonathan's been hurt every year he's been in the NFL, and he wants $20 million a year. He's not going to get it here. And in the zone scheme, there's a lot of backs who adjust to it. Damian Pierce did not. I don't know if he ever will. Derrick Henry said right after the season, he told The Athletic, one of my biggest regrets was that I didn't learn the zone scheme quicker, because if I had, I might have had another season like 1,500 to 2,000 yards. It took him a while. Now, whether Damian Pierce can do it or not, I don't know. Devin Singletary's contract's up. They got the most they could get out of him. But any decisions that Casario and Ryans make, even if I disagree with them, I'm going to be on board because I trust them. I've known D'Amico since the day after he was drafted, and I've always thought so highly of him. And he did better than I anticipated. And so I believe in what they're doing. And the only player that Casario in his rebuild has ever given more than a 2-year contract is Clay Johnston as punter. And Clay's done a great job, and he needs to be re-signed. They re-signed Weeks. They need to re-sign Fairbairn. While all these other teams have problems on special teams, the Texans have been the best in the NFL for the last 2 years. And that is kicking, punting, snapping, and coverage. And I would make sure to keep them together. And they want to reward certain players for jobs well done because that sends a great message to their teammates. You perform, and if it's reasonable, we will re-sign you. It's like I think Nico Collins will get a nice raise and extension because if he waits, he has another year like that, price of doing business is going to go up. I don't think looking for offensive linemen. They started 11 because of injuries. They may bring in another tackle. I don't think Charlie Heck is long for this world here. I think not sure about George Fant. One of the things that impressed me the most about Casario last year, going back and the start of training camp when players started going down, the great job they did signing players off the street. And then after the season started, they ended with their second, third, and fourth safeties all signed off the street during the season, all contributed to them winning a playoff game and being tied at halftime in the divisional round at Baltimore. Their personnel department does a really good job, and the coaches do a really good job of coaching these guys. And it's tough for Casario because David Culley and his staff, the personnel people will meet with a position coach. Okay, tell us what you're looking for. And they'll tell them. Well, they had to do it with Tully. Then Lovey made changes, had to do it again. And D'Amico kept a lot of the coaches, and that helped because he knew what they were looking for. But he wanted to know, what do you want, D'Amico, in your defensive players? And then Bobby Slowick, Bobby, what are you looking for? The blueprint of the 49ers, every time D'Amico talked about his defense, it was all about the line. You look at the 49ers, all their high picks and trades that are costly are free agent signings about the line. Drake Greenlaw, 5th-round pick. Fred Warner, 3rd-round pick. They don't have a number one in their back seven, and that's why I keep telling people, in your mock drafts, take a defensive lineman. And I think it's going to be an edge rusher, whether Grenard is back or not, because they lose Jerry Hughes, they lose Derek Barnett. And Barnett's another example of a guy who played so well when they signed him off the street. And all that bodes well for what they're going to do in free agency and the draft. I can't wait.
Now, what is the conversation around Dotson Schultz? Is he one of those players that fits the criteria that, hey, you produce for me and, maybe we'll reward you with a contract, 635 yards, 5 touchdowns. We know he wants to remain here in Houston. I think he said it on Sports Radio 610 last week. What are your thoughts on Dotson Schultz and how the Houston Texans approach him in free agency?
They have budgets on every player, and they may break it a little bit. And I don't think somebody, after last year's tight end crop, which was fantastic, and tight ends are bouncing around the NFL, I think Dalton Schultz will re-sign. C.J. Stroud likes working with him a lot, trusts him, and he blocked much better for the Texans than he did for the Cowboys. Cowboy people, he can block my grandmother. And I watched him a lot hit people because in this system, if you don't block, like the 49ers, receivers, backs, tight ends, they block. You don't block, you don't play. And I think Schultz will be re-signed. I think the guy that I'm most curious about is John Mechie the third. He got a mulligan because he blew out his knee at Alabama. Then he had to overcome leukemia. People started to get restless about him last season. I'm like, my God, give the guy a break. Next year will be make or break for him. And I don't think I see some mock drafts have the Texans taking an offensive tackle in the first round. I'm thinking, are you not paying attention to the Texans? And they're not drafting an offensive tackle in the first round. And I don't think they're drafting a receiver because it's too deep of a draft, too talented a draft. Tank came in the 3rd round. Nico came in the 3rd round. You don't need to use a first-round pick on a wideout. That's why I think it'll be somebody on defense. If Steven, it's interesting. Pro Football Focus today listed every free agent like 200. The first Texan was Steven Nelson at 35. Schultz was 36. Phone rang, and I couldn't keep going down to get to Grenard and the others. Not sure why they didn't have them rated higher, but they're not going to re-sign everybody because there's players out there they want to add. Now that the staff knows what those players are capable of doing in their system, they can determine whether they want to keep them or not. And I think there's going to be a lot of changes. And as far as having a lot of money, cap's supposed to go up at least 20 million, maybe 25. It'd be the largest increase in history. They roll money over like most teams do. And they're not going to go out on a wild spending spree and spend 30 million a year on somebody that's 30 years old. That's just not what they're looking for.
friend of the show, Mark Burgeon, with the comment there. John, what keeps you ticking with the coverage, man? Which spans 5 decades. Mark Burgeon is a Believe in Steelers podcast host with Ike Taylor. What keeps you ticking, man? What keeps you going?
I've done that podcast with him and
Yes.
Ike up there. Well, let's see. I've been in the business 54 years. Started in 1973 when I was going into my junior year at Baylor, when Dave Campbell, a great sports editor from Waco Tribune Arrow, founder of Texas Football Magazine, hired me to cover high schools. I graduated 75, came to Chronicle 76 to cover the original Houston Aeros with Gordie Howe and his sons, Mark and Marty. And then I moved over. First Oiler training camp was 77. And so I liked doing it. I retired from the Chronicle after the 2022 draft. My last story was on Jalen Petrie, Sikkim. And I thought I would do radio for a year and then ride off into the sunset, even though my wife didn't want me to, because she didn't want to have to spend any more time with me than she already did. And so Mattress Mac reached out immediately and asked me to come meet with him, and I did. And he wanted to start a website called Gallery Sports based on gambling. And I said,
Mm-hmm.
I don't gamble. I don't pay attention to gambling. He said, look, you just write like you wrote for the Chronicle. You use a lot of good numbers that's helped me make a lot of money through the years. And I'm like, I want to say, wow, well, where's my cut? And so he hired me. We did that for 10 months before he folded it, and I had a blast. And then 610 asked me if I would work for their website. They wanted to boost the website. And I said, sure. Writing one column, it became 5. Then they said, would you do a podcast with Sean Pendergast? I said, sure. That became 3. And so I had a blast doing it. And it helps. When I started with Gallery Sports, I could write Astros. I covered Astros World Series. It was so much fun to write about a winner and a champion. I thought I'd be on the other side of the grass before they had a Super Bowl winner here. And now I believe they're going to win a Super Bowl with D'Amico and C.J. Stroud. Don't know when, but I believe they will. And I hope I'm still around to see it. And so I've had so much fun with the Texans getting better. And I knew D'Amico had been a great coordinator. I talked to Kyle Shanahan on and off the record for columns I did on D'Amico and Bobby Slowick. And everything he told me about them right after they were hired, every bit of it's true. And it gets me really fired up for next season. And even though the schedule is so difficult, what this team's going to be capable of doing after another productive offseason.
John, you did mention about the Houston Texans potentially not getting any splash moves, let's say, for a running game, defensive line. D'Amico Ryans did stress the importance, though, of the run game and the defensive line afterwards in a press conference after the season. So what do the Texans do then in terms of the run game? Because it definitely feels like D'Amico wants to expand the run game a lot better, especially the defensive line as well. The interior was a weak spot for this team. We've experienced the run game was also not so great, could have been a lot better, even though Devin Singletary did the best he could. What are the Houston Texans' plans or avenues of success for both of those positions then?
Remember 2 years ago, they were the worst team in the NFL by far against the run, and terrible. They'd been the worst since 2018 when they were 3rd in the NFL. So I thought, okay, if they could just get to maybe 20 to 22 against the run, what an improvement that would be. And if they hadn't let Jonathan Taylor go crazy at the end of the season, they were 3rd against the run going into that game. They finished 6th against the run. And then, of course, they got killed on the ground against the Ravens. But the fact is, D'Amico said, we've got to improve against the run.
Mm-hmm.
So who else did they have here? They had Sheldon Rankins. They brought in Will Anderson. He was great against the run. So they had 2 new defensive linemen. They had Cashman, who was healthy for the first time in his career in a contract year, and Christian Harris. And then in the secondary, they had Derek Stingley Jr., Steven Nelson, and then they had Jimmy Ward. So really, the only new guy, Ward was new, and 2 defensive tackles were new. going into the season. Now, injuries forced them to make some changes,
Mhm.
but they made a complete turnaround because of the scheme, the attitude, the coaching. And that's what I think is going to happen on offense. If you look at their offensive line, Michael Dieter was brought in here to be a backup. He didn't play it down at a position in Miami in 22, and he had to start here. And then you got Juice Scruggs. They traded in the second round to make him the center. He gets hurt. Jared Patterson has to play center. He'd been playing left guard. Then when Juice comes back, he plays left guard. Kenyon Green's whole season was a washout. Titus was playing out of position because they thought he was a better left guard, and they had the five best linemen with Fant at right tackle. Then Titus goes out. They should have some luck with injuries because they had so many injuries. They were, I think, at one point near the end of the season, they were 1-2 with people on IR, and they used their maximum number of guys to come back. You know, they even had Fairbairn out. Early in the year, Clay Johnston was hurt. And so up front, ideally, your tackles will be Tunsil and Howard. Kenyon Green go into his third season. He's had an entire season and off season to prepare physically and mentally to be the player that Caserio and Lovie Smith thought he could be when they took him 16th. Then you would have Scruggs at center, Shaq Mason right guard, and then you'd have some good backups. And they'll probably sign another couple of linemen as well. But what they need there is they need to be healthy, stay healthy. Also, not to be overlooked, Chris Strasser never coached the system. Now, I was stunned when I didn't know he had never coached his own scheme. He came from Indy. They signed him. Bobby Slowick was praising him near the end of the season about the job he'd done with all the injuries, and he admitted he'd never coached the scheme. And I think that showed a lot. So Chris Strasser, after coaching it for a year, he should be better. But they still got to get enough back. And I wouldn't take one in the first, second, or third round. You can get one. Look at Isaiah Pacheco. The NFL's loaded with running backs who come in the mid to late rounds, or even free agency. I remember when Gary Kubiak had Steve Slayton, third round pick. Steve had over 1,300 yards. An undrafted kick cover from Tennessee, Arian Foster, practice squad twice. All of a sudden, he gets to play near the end of the year. Boom, he looks good. Well, they didn't trust him enough. They still used the second round pick on Ben Tate.
Yes.
And is that Ben's last name?
Yes, Ben Tate.
Ben Tate.
So Ben came in as second round, got hurt. Arian had to play all the time. Became one of the best backs in the league, and the best in franchise history because he figured out that system. They will find somebody who understands the zone scheme where the linemen go there. He gets the ball, he plants the left foot, he goes, and he instinctively picks up the right hole. Dameon Pierce is all about the power. Go straight ahead. Hit the gap that you're supposed to go through. If you have to adjust, fine. Run over people, give them a shoulder, give them a leg, and it's more about power. And the other one is finesse. Mike Shanahan, Gary Kubiak, Kyle Shanahan, you use the word finesse about their offense, they just get infuriated because they don't believe it's about finesse. Well, it is, because you got to think and you got to be instinctive. You can't just get it and go. So I think they'll find a back. I'm guessing Singletary, who did not fumble one time. He didn't fumble and recovered it, not one fumble in all the times he touched the ball. They only had two players lose a fumble besides they lost six. Two of them four were Stroud, and one was Beck, and the other one was Schultz. That to me was a miracle. Only two non-quarterbacks fumbled. And so Singletary's got a lot of good qualities. I think they'll try to re-sign him. Don't think at his age, 27, his size, he's going to get more than he got last year. And then they'll look for somebody in the draft or a free agent that they think will fit what they want to do.
And one last for me, John McClain, thank you so much for being on here with us. How impressive was CJ Stroud rookie season, because I myself said the best rookie season that we've ever seen. And we brought up a lot of points on why I think it was the best. So many offensive linemen out, losing Tank Dell kind of in the middle of the season, only 3 100 rushing yard games all year, which was from Devin Singletary. I think when you add all that up and you see 10 wins on the season, a division title, a home playoff win, it's hard not to say that CJ Stroud's rookie season wasn't amazing.
It's going to be hard for him to show the kind of improvement that he needs against a schedule like he's going up against. One reason they need to improve their defense is because look at the quarterbacks: Lamar Jackson, Patrick Mahomes, Tua Tagovailoa, Jared Goff, Jordan Love, not to mention Trevor Lawrence and the others in the division. And they play the NFC North and the AFC East. And so they're going to play a lot tougher. So they got to get better on defense. And Stroud, he won't carry the offense. I mean, they were 22nd or 3rd in rushing. But don't you know they'd like to be the way it was here when in 19, I think, when they were like 14th or 12th. Just be in that some area where teams have to worry about the running game, where they have to bite on the play fake. And that's one of the reasons he was so remarkable. And I'll go back, and I love to go back and read scouting reports. And I won't say publicly or tweet, because I've been wrong so many times, like bet the house the NFL's going to LA. And one of many, the Texans will draft a quarterback, or I'll eat the newspaper.
Yeah.
And so I've been wrong too. And I love watching them. I did that with Watson. Went back and read all the top people. We all make mistakes. And there was one that just really got me about Stroud. He's going to have to throw in tighter windows, and he's not going to be able to do it in NFL like in college, because in college the windows were open more, and he had great receivers who made him look good. Now I think it's pretty obvious he made them look good too.
Yeah.
He played just as big a role in their development as they did in his. And the first time I really paid attention to him was Rose Bowl, when he threw for over 500 yards as a freshman. And then last year, year before, I watched him all year, but I thought the Texans were so bad they're going to get Bryce Young. I saw almost every game he played for 2 years because I wanted to see what Bill O'Brien was doing as well. And I thought, okay, they're going to get that first pick. And I thought it all the way till the end of the Indianapolis game. And then I'm like everybody else, oh, my God, Lovey, what have you done? You've cost them Bryce Young. And now they're going to get stuck with C.J. Stroud because they were never going to draft Anthony Richardson. And so at the combine, he looked great. Young didn't throw. People were talking about, man, what a great combine. If you can't throw in shorts and a T-shirt when nobody's rushing you and nobody's covering your receivers, you shouldn't be a quarterback. But he looked good everywhere he went. And then we all knew Young was going to Carolina, and they were going to draft Stroud second. And despite the cognitive test, they don't subscribe to that company, and I'm pretty sure not many more will either. But when they drafted him, and everybody was so excited. We go the all-season program, rookie minicamp, all-season program, preseason. Never saw any indication that he was going to be great as early as he was. That 0-2 start, I'm thinking, geez, I picked him to win 6. I probably should have picked him to win 4. And then Jacksonville, I thought, okay, that's a fluke, 37-17. Caught him off guard. But then Pittsburgh, when they beat Pittsburgh, and they beat Pittsburgh worse than any Houston team since the 91 Oilers, totally neutralized T.J. Watt on J.J. Watt Day. That's when I thought maybe this team's got a chance to be special, and this kid is good. And I think it wasn't until the Tampa game. We're supposed to be, there's no cheering in the press box. If you cheer, they threaten to remove your press pass, but there's no reason you can't reach out and squeeze the hell out of somebody's arm sitting next to you. When he threw that last touchdown pass against the Buccaneers to pull it out against the end, there was a lot of arm squeezing up there. And I was one of them doing it because I thought then this kid has got a chance to be special. And one of the reasons he's special is because he's such a good guy, and everybody likes him. And so I'm really happy for him, and to see the coaches get the recognition they deserve for the system, the way he's adapted to the system, and they love everything about him. I know Houston fans do as well. Can't wait to see what he does for an encore. And I'm just glad that he didn't decide to go to college on a basketball scholarship, because it turns out he was a hell of a basketball player.
Yes. He definitely was. And as we wrap up the podcast, before we do, I do want to give a great shout out and a rest in peace to the life of Mark Lane. It was a really good, just a new friend for me during his later stages. I had him scheduled to come on my YouTube channel at one time, and we were here just like this. I never hit record. We were just starting to talk about content creation. I was barely at 1,000 subscribers, kind of struggling. And he just gave me advice for 35 minutes, just talking about content, talking about what I can do, how can I improve. And that was just an example of the kindness from Mark Lane. And he was just such a nice guy and such a great guy as well from anybody else that knew him personally. John, you got any good stories from about Mark Lane?
I sure do. About 10 years ago, I'm at the NFL League meetings in March at the Biltmore in Arizona, and I'm hanging around outside the media room, BSing with people, and I see a guy come in I'd never seen, and I see this a lot, first-timers, whether it's the combine, and they look like deer caught in the headlights. So I decided a long time ago, when I saw somebody like that, go up and introduce myself, and I did that with Mark. He told me who he was, and he was doing his first league meetings. And I said, well, an NFL's having a party night around the pool. If you want to come and you meet me, I'll introduce you around. And so I did. And I started with the Texans. And I remember Bob and Janice McNair talking to him and talking about what a nice young man he was. And Shireen Williams from Pro Football Talk, used to be a Forward Star Telegram, is my closest friend in the league. And forever we ran what's called a Combine Quotes Network, in which we would assign members of the Pro Football Writers of America players to transcribe their interviews, send to a bulletin board. So you might do 3 or 4 over the life of the Combine and get access to 300. When I introduced Mark, he kept wanting to do more. He kept saying, let me do more. How many you done today? 7. Nobody else has done 7 all week. Well, I want to keep doing them. So we declared him the champion. And then 3 years ago, Shireen Williams and I were inducted into the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, second media class in their history. And I'm looking around, and there's Mark. And I said, what are you doing here? He drove down from Arkansas. He drove down that day, and then he turned around and drove back to Arkansas that night after he was done. And I was flabbergasted that he would do that. But that's the kind of guy he was. And last year he was having those lung problems, and they couldn't find out what's wrong with him. He's 36 years old. He'd been battling these lung issues for a couple of years. We're at the combine, and Mark was always thin. He lost so much weight battling his illness. And I'm standing there in a crowd around Tank Dell, and I look up, and there's Mark dragging a tank of oxygen with oxygen in his nose, holding his tape recorder. I said, what in the hell are you doing here? Looking for sympathy to get in the front of the line? He said, nope, I want to work. He said, I got to work. And so he drugged that thing around everywhere, did his interviews. He was such a hard worker, so conscientious, right up until the end. I remember one time he's in the hospital, and he had been in bad shape. And I think his sister took a picture of him. He pulled the tray, put his laptop on the tray. He's in his hospital gown, and he's typing, working on a story. So Mark is a great guy who's going to be missed by many. I planted 3 trees in his name on the side of his obituary.
Yeah, anybody that wants to find the obituary, what's his name? The Mr. Cole Thompson had a link for the obituary to donate any sort of money, plant a tree in his memory, write and share a memory. It's really good stuff, man. It's really,
yes,
really
it
good
is.
stuff. Ruben, go ahead, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, just wanted as we end today, man. Mr. John McClain, thank you so much, for being on this episode here with us tonight. Like Harley mentioned in the intro, we grew up listening to you. This was, I felt like I was a kid again, in the passenger seat of my father's Corolla, just hearing John McClain on the radio. But before we go, can you once again let the fans know we have 82 people in here? They absolutely love this. Where can they find your latest work?
Well, my Twitter account's still McClain, MCCLAIN, McClain _on_ NFL. I still got about 152,000 Twitter followers, and I'm on Texans Radio on 610 every Thursday night, 6 to 6:30. I'm on KRIV with Nate Griffin on Monday and Friday mornings at 8:22 a.m. And then the others stations, I'm on stations in 7 different cities. And I'll tell you, I've had some interest from stations in Houston. There's a chance I could be at one, and I'm not in a hurry, not even exactly sure what I want to do. I'm probably going to do some freelance writing for the Texans website. And so I'm not going away. Thank you guys for the opportunity. You want to do it again, let me know.
Absolutely, guys. Thank you so much for being a part of today's live stream with us. We had the General John McClain. I am Ruben. That is Harley Dugan. Y'all do us a favor, man. Y'all have a real